Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Nothing works right. Okay, well, we got it on the air anyway, and I think it probably sounded reasonably good to those of you tuning in live, those of you tuning in by podcast. It's perfect. I'm awesome. And everything, something. I'm still screwing around with the soundboard. I might have to work on that over the weekend. It's causing a lot of problems. Used to be so much easier. Now, of course, would anyone like granola? Because that's going on in the background, too. So we have granola available for those who are interested, if you can make your way here in the next 30 seconds or so. Otherwise, we'll save it for you, and we'll have it later on. All right, well, reversed engineered, something of a success in getting the show started, but my water isn't here. So I'll have to go and get it maybe during break number one. And I don't even have Greg Dworkin here to lean on to carry the ball while I go and get some water. All right, well, it doesn't matter. Today, I guess, we're supposed to wait again, sit around waiting for Donald Trump to get indicted, not likely to be arrested anytime soon. I don't even know if it's all that likely that he'll end up being indicted. And Friday would be a good day for it. I mean, if I'm the authorities and Donald Trump is playing up the whole thing and he's in fact fundraising off of it, I guess everybody should have guessed that would happen. But if he's looking to create a scene, I suppose the thing you might want to do is do the Friday news dump kind of indictment. Can you arrange for a special Saturday indictment instead? I don't know. I guess you could try and do that. Oh, thank you very much. Water arriving, thanks to the valued production staff here. Yes, that reminds me. I haven't had my foot massage. And I need to have that happen before the show. Also, my usual request of one nice, fresh, hot pizza and $1 million. As long as it's happening. It wasn't happening last night for the basketball, as I was sitting around saying, well, I'm not going to win, but I wish this team would win, because that's kind of fun, and then they wouldn't win. Then it turned out that I actually had a shot at some money because, a couple of things. First of all, everybody's brackets are exploded thanks to Princeton, and I really do thank Princeton for that and wish them luck. That's a team I'd love to see win. But now that I'm involved and would like to actively see them win, I guess it's probably all over. But let's see. Last night had Tennessee won and UCLA won. I'd have picked up enough points to have put me like an actual contention all of a sudden for the pride and prestige that comes with doing well in something like this, which is not much, but it's nice and it keeps you interested. And that didn't happen. But so what? Okay, who cares? And then, of course, I realized, as I do every year, the pool I participate in purely for fun and nothing else is run by people who live in Connecticut, which by itself is not a horrible thing, obviously. Greg, right, could certainly administer such a thing. Well, one of the problems with doing a basketball pool with people who live in Connecticut is that, and it's, there's people participating from all over, but it's run by people in Connecticut. And so I think primarily it's grown to be, the work and neighborhood associates of the person who runs the pool who lives in Connecticut. They, too, live in Connecticut. And so you're in a basketball pool with 100 people, 80 of whom live in Connecticut or were raised in Connecticut, and then they all bet on UConn. And so the annual conundrum is, do I go with UConn, further than I want them to, or, God forbid, I don't know, win the whole thing? I'm sure Greg would be perfectly happy. And I guess since it means nothing to me one way or another, go ahead, make everybody happy, and let UConn win. But you take them further in the tournament, because there's every reason to believe that they will go further in the tournament. But 80 other people will also have them going that far in the tournament. You're not going to gain any ground on them, but you're also not going to lose ground. So the question is, Do you take a risk at being the one of the 20 people who don't pick UConn at some point? You know what I mean? And if you're wrong and UConn goes on, you're kind of out of contention. But if you're right, and then you vault to the front. But then again, also, if you're not already in front and then UConn wins, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to move anywhere. So anyway, I find that UConn, UVA, and University of Maryland are three teams that I can't get right no matter what I do. And I've tried saying, okay, well, if you're picking them to win any particular game, change your mind. At some point, UConn a little less so. They tend to win more often. But anyway, there's no formula for it because then it becomes, well, and if you pick them to lose, then they win. And you have to just, I don't know. You can't just say, my usual rule in my head is whatever I think they're going to do, pick the opposite. And then I realize that the next year comes around, I remember the rule, and then I say, what have I done here, though? Have I picked the correct thing or the opposite thing? Have I baked in the reversal? I'm not really sure. Anyway, they give me a lot of frustration. So does everything else. Speaking of which, I don't know. Are we still speaking of, we were speaking of, one of the people that frustrates me is Donald Trump. That's true. I think I can admit that. At this point, longtime listeners will find that surprising. But, we're still supposedly on indictment watch, maybe. And, I think there's plenty of credible sources that say that we should expect that sometime soon. But then there's the non-credible sources, the incredible sources, like Donald Trump, who have been telling everybody not only was going to be indicted, but he's also going to be arrested and maybe executed. Which is very exciting. He actually hasn't floated that possibility. I don't know anybody who has. Don't look at me. But, he's hyping the thing. He's overplaying the thing. And, of course, there was the interesting influence play of trying to make Ron DeSantis and other declared and undeclared Republican presidential contenders have to take a position on what's going on and forcing them, remarkably enough, to defend him in order that they not offend MAGA America, who are, represent some significant portion of potential, anyway, primary voters next year, next time around. That is remarkable all by itself. And then the more mundane things like being reminded that who sent this around? I don't know. Somebody did, and it was great when they did, and we loved it. And it was the story that Donald Trump had been sent by his various followers $1.5 million in the 3 days following his announcement that he was about to be arrested. And I remember he said to everybody, I'm going to be arrested on Tuesday. They sent him $1.5 million. I mean, that's what it's worth to lie. You say that, and then people just throw money. I don't know whether they thought they were going to be bailing him out or, more likely it was just defiance. I'm going to own the libs. How much do the libs cost? $1.5 million. I'm going to own the libs by contributing $1.5 million to a person who, says he's living on a pile of money as it is. And I'll show them I'm so pro-Trump that even as he's about to be arrested for wasting all of his money on hush money for having had sex with a porn star, I'll send him $1.5 million. By the way, Stormy Daniels must be tearing her hair out in all of this. She gets less than 1/10 that money for actually having to have had sex with Donald Trump. And then she's paid to be quiet about it. Donald Trump won't shut up about the whole thing, and he got $1.5 million. And he wasn't any good, apparently. All right. Anyway, I just find the whole thing remarkable in itself. So there you have it. $1.5 million for announcing that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday. And he was never likely to be arrested at all, this week. If anything was going to be an indictment, it wasn't Tuesday, yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I'd like to announce that I will be arrested next Tuesday, and see how that goes. I did toot out via Mastodon yesterday that my Patreon account will be arrested on Tuesday to see if that worked. People loved the joke, but no $1.5 million. So, in fact, no, I got $0.0 million. $0.0 period. It's not just a rounding error or a matter of the magnitude. There was nothing for that. So we're going to have to go with the arrest, I guess, and we're going to go forward with that. Somebody pointed out that I don't have a cult. That's the reason that I didn't get the money. And so I would like to announce that my cult will be arrested on Tuesday as well. And it can happen simultaneously. So you should just go straight to the point where you give me money, and then we'll see how it goes from there. All right. Well, let's see. Other things that are worth griping about. Oh, yes, right. Well, for one thing, Donald Trump is making terroristic threats, and that's awful. And I'm sorry to hear about it. Now I'm distracted by somebody who's sending a piece of video from the basketball yesterday, and I think it's the Kansas State game, and it says, I can't stop watching this. This is brilliant, and I can't remember what was so brilliant, so I'm not sure what the thing is. But I did pick Kansas State. I got that one. That's what put me in contention last night. Anyway, let's see. I got a story here of, like I said, of Trump making terroristic threats. You should realize that that's what's going on here. Let's see, by way of preview, well, the headline is, Trump warns of, quote, potential death and destruction if he is charged in hush money case. Now, as you know, I'm a gambling man, at least when it comes to gambling for pride and prestige on basketball with people from Connecticut and no money whatsoever, much like the radio show itself. Actually, if I could get all of you to pay for my pool entries, that would be reasonable too. I think, by the way, I have to stop doing that. The pools are getting too expensive. I want people to win money, even if it's not me. But I don't know, man. Inflation in these pools. Luckily, I don't participate in any that where money changes hands. So, there you go. Anyway, Trump warns of potential death and destruction if he is charged in hush money case. How did I get back to the basketball off of this? I don't know. It's a terroristic threat, and he should be arrested for making it. I happen to notice at the moment the rude pundit pointing out that, if this were any other country, if we saw the former president of any other country warning of death and destruction in the wake of their arrest, we'd think, man, that place is we'll say sinkhole. You know the word we're talking about. It's the one that causes us to pull out the censoring horn when we talk, right? Okay. And that's true. That's a very third world move. And Trump is a very third world guy. Oh, yes, I remember. Now I was gambling. I was saying this is a gambling man. He says, Trump warns of death and destruction if he is arrested. And I was just wondering, mine or his? And if it's just a 50-50 proposition, I say, let's roll the dice and go for it and see where we land. I'd be willing to put mine up against his and see how it goes. If it results in his death and destruction, well, he had it coming. The guy was on trial in 15 different jurisdictions. Eventually he could and should go down in a hail of bullets if he wanted to do it Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid style, make a hero of himself. Go for it, whatever. If he wanted to do it Ceausescu style, I'm available on weekends. Trump warns of potential death and destruction if he is charged in hush money case. John Wagner says, I doubt he goes with the Wagner pronunciation. John Wagner at the Washington Post, I suppose. And let's see, illustrated by a picture of Trump getting out of the beast and trying to look like he's, shade under 300 or so. Former President Donald Trump warned early Friday, that's today, this very day, of, quote, potential death and destruction if he is charged in Manhattan in a criminal case related to alleged hush money payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels to conceal an affair. No word on whether there would be death and destruction if he were indicted in Georgia or elsewhere, but whatever. The post-midnight posting on Truth Social, Trump's social media platform, was his latest and most explicit allusion to violence that could follow an indictment stemming from an investigation led by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, whom Trump called, and just to add flavor to the whole thing, a degenerate psychopath. Which, again, every Republican accusation is a confession. Change my mind. Trump wrote, "What kind of person can charge another person?" And the answer is a prosecutor. "In this case, a former president of the United States who got more votes than any sitting president in history and a leading candidate by far for the Republican Party nomination with a crime when it is known by all that no crime has been committed, and also known that potential death and destruction in such a false charge could be catastrophic for our country." ? Somehow. That's a very poorly punctuated sentence. And of course, random capitalization, really. That's not a bad word. That's how you should probably describe it. Let's see, what did he capitalize here? He did, of course, capitalize President of the United States, which, forgivable sin, but actually, unless you're speaking of President Trump and putting a proper name to it, the President of the United States, actually you're only supposed to capitalize United States in that. President remains uncapitalized. It's not, it's a title, but I mean, it's just what you do. You're the presiding officer. But these days we capitalize it because he seems like an important person or something. Anyway, that, and then, later in the sentence, who got more votes than any sitting president, capitalized, in history. But again, same mistake. And leading candidate by far for the Republican Party nomination, also fine. But with a crime, capital C crime, like that's how big the crime is. And when it is known by all that no, and that's in all caps because he's emphasizing it, but then he capitalizes crime again. It's just bizarre. Goes on for a little while. False charge, catastrophic for our country, capitalized C, country. He's a very dumb guy, and it's quite annoying. But also he's a terrorist. I mean, that's really the point of reading you this thing. This should get you arrested for making terroristic threat. This is a bomb threat, essentially, against the entire country. Let's see. What else do they have to say this? In a separate post Thursday, Trump criticized those who have called for his supporters to remain peaceful. Like that. That's just rude. Over the weekend, Trump urged a capitals, all capitals, protest over his potential arrest in the case, which he wrongly predicted would happen Tuesday. They should arrest him for predicting wrongly, I think. The messages have all had echoes of the days leading up to the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol by a violent pro-Trump mob. Trump had urged his followers to assemble in Washington that day, saying, "Be there, we'll be wild," as he pushed to stop Congress from certifying Joe Biden's win. Of course, I guess the big difference here is he has produced zero in terms of crowds. There were more counter-protesters and even there were more reporters and photographers there than pro-Trump supporters outside of the courthouse on Manhattan yesterday. Not much of a manifestation, but then again, there's been no arrest either. So, also, by the way, they should fine Trump to cover the costs of police overtime when cities like New York have to react to the threat of terrorist violence. That materializes because of, or the threat anyway, that emerges because of Trump's mouthing off. And quite honestly, given that he's also in court in these various jurisdictions, the judge presiding over the Manhattan case might well consider enjoining Trump from commenting this way anyway, inciting violence via social media in the middle of the proceedings. But, another way to do it is dump him in the ocean. Anyway, 5 people, of course, died in the attack or in its aftermath when they attacked the Capitol last time he attempted to raise an army in his defense. And 140 police officers were injured in the assault. The House impeached Trump on a charge of inciting an insurrection. The Senate acquitted him. That was wrong. Trump has been commenting frequently on the hush money cases. A Manhattan grand jury weighs evidence against him. The panel's not scheduled to meet again until at least Monday, so I guess that's off. According to people familiar with the situation who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss proceedings that are secret. What a secret. Prosecutors from Bragg's office have been presenting grand jurors, and they are grand, and we might as well capitalize that. It's not correct, but let's go ahead and do it. Trump supporters will appreciate it. Presenting them with evidence related to hush money payments to Daniels during the 2016 presidential campaign. I'm just thinking, maybe we stop here. The point of the article is that he's making terroristic threats. The rest of this stuff you know, and probably a waste of your time. Anything worth pulling out at the bottom? Let's see, in case you're interested. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy slammed Bragg's investigation, but said supporters of Trump should not protest if the former president is indicted. Nobody should harm one another, McCarthy said on Sunday, but that was last Sunday. By this Sunday, he'll be calling for violence. Following Trump's call for protest, we want calmness out there. And let's see, Democrats, of course, critical of Friday's social media post, and one of the people you can almost always reach for comment on that, Ted Lieu, and it's worth reaching him, says, if you still support Donald Trump, you are supporting an individual who has called for chaos and violence and continues to call for chaos and violence, he said in a tweet. They didn't have to reach him. He just put himself out there. And, go the extra step. Let everybody know that's a terroristic threat, and the fact that a former president did it should not, really shouldn't excuse it. And ordinarily, that would get you banned from Twitter back in the old days. But now, of course, I don't know. I guess it would get you an extra blue check. I suppose is that something they can do? I don't know. You're just checked or you're not. All right, let's see. No time to really stop and watch this video of the basketball from yesterday, although I'm really curious about it. So maybe during the break. Let's take the break now so I can take a look. We're almost there. 9:23. All right. Time to dive into Pocket. I knew I would have to do that eventually. I got a couple of pieces here. I'm hesitant to get into them because they are in interview format, which I disfavor for reading on the radio because it's weird. And when it's, when you're scanning things visually, okay, it's easy to kind of skip over that stuff. But if you're reading it aloud, then and you're trying to do the two different people, not to mention the fact that who knows whether the names of the people involved are going to be hard to pronounce. But let me throw you this one just before the break. I think you can get the gist, certainly, of what's going on here. And again, because it's an interview, there's a lot of extraneous material that doesn't matter as much as the headline, which tells at least part of the story. The interview explains a little bit more. It's in Slate, and it's written by Dan, I don't know, Kois? I don't know. Kois. Like Kois, the fish in the pond. Quas? Qua? I don't know. I'm not really sure. Kois. Well, okay. I'm sorry, Dan. It's not that hard. It's only 4 letters. I'm a pronunciation fanatic, and I'm no good at it, which is a terrible combination. Plus, I feel a lot of guilt. That's not your fault. Anyway, here's the headline that'll tell you the story, the part that you need to know. An interview, we don't need to know that, but it happened, with the school board chair, sounds important, who forced out a principal, oh man, after, shall we go with the Michelangelo pronunciation, or do we say Michelangelo? Michelangelo's David was shown in class. And the thing that's great about the David is it's a wiener statue. And everyone knows that that's what makes it valuable culturally speaking. I don't know. There are some art world freaks who are like, something about the way it was sculpted. But everybody knows that it is a awesome excuse to show a wiener. And that's the big problem here. It's exactly what you imagined. Some jackass school board people forced out teachers and principals because they showed this great work of art to kids, and it's a wiener, and that's how they evaluated it. And so therefore you're a groomer because Michelangelo. And they can't arrest Michelangelo himself, I guess. Hello, many of you know me. I'm Michelangelo, the terrific sculptor. I don't know what happened to my Italian accent, but if you arrest me, there's going to be death and chaos. So that's why they didn't do it. Very few people know that. Very few. Even that line was delivered as Trump. On Thursday, that's the day before today, and 2 days after Trump said he was going to be arrested, but didn't get arrested and got $1.5 million, a Tallahassee not a Tallahassee Democrat, but the Tallahassee Democrat. There's only one, and it's a newspaper, so it can't even vote. The Tallahassee Democrat reported that the principal of a local charter school, the Tallahassee Classical School, and I mean, this is classical art, the Tallahassee Classical School, which I'm sure probably believes it's only teaching, the white supremacist style of classical education or whatever. I don't know. Was forced to resign after 3 parents complained about an art teacher showing a picture of Michelangelo's 16th century sculpture of David. The wiener guy. You know who I'm talking about. Parental rights are supreme. And that means protecting the interests of all parents, whether it's 1, 10, 20, or 50. The chair of the school board, Barney Bishop III, told the paper. I'm surprised it wasn't Barney Rubble. But there you have it. To figure out exactly how this happened, Dan Coys, I don't know, maybe we can figure it out, called Bishop, who is also, according to his biography, who I need to get ready for music. Ready? There we are. According to his biography, a consultant, a lobbyist, and, quote, outspoken advocate for the free enterprise system. I don't see how that matters. And, unfortunately, an Eagle Scout. Boo, they should strip him of his Eagle Scout status for this. Our conversation has been edited for clarity. And if you wanted to know what was in that conversation, I could read some of that to you. We'll try that after this break. But for now, think about the wiener guy if you want.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, let's see. I've got some pronunciation guides. I was going to look at interviews on my usual go-to on stuff like this. I'll go to YouTube and look for an interview with the person who wrote the piece, or if they've been interviewed on TV anywhere, and where in TV they prepare ahead of time by saying, how do you pronounce your name? So, a pretty good reliable source for most of that stuff. But Jingy has this, and I've been, doing less and less monitoring of the Twitter stream, but I do try to keep the KITM hashtag open. And Jingy says, he asks, might I offer a pronunciation key for Mr. whatever her name is, but we'll get to that in a second. Mr. Garvey says it best. Okay. Okay. So he wrote Ko-is, and that to me is like co-is? Like is? The word is? No. Pronounced co as in cocoa, right? And is as in geese. Cois. All right. It's like option number 9. on my list so far, but yeah, I think that's Cois. Who's Cois? Well, he's Dan and he writes for Slate. That's the answer. Maybe that's how I'll remember it if his name ever comes up again. By the way, while I'm here, nice picture from Darwin, who sends us the hashtag lock him up and a picture, a mocked up picture of Donald Trump being dragged into custody by police. And it's nice to think about. All right. Let's see. Where else? Now I'm tempted to run down the rest of the KITM hashtag because that's where friends gather. But more importantly, as I mentioned, there's a wiener statue to talk about, and that's the important thing here, right? So back to the story where so I guess we're talking about Florida, and a charter school that calls itself the Classical School shows classical art to the kids, and people are getting fired. Why? Because the explanation is parental rights are supreme, and that means protecting the interests of all parents, whether it's 1, 10, 20, or 50. That is, of course, nonsensical, because by that logic, if one parent comes in and says, I demand the showing of the wiener guy, what happens? That parent's right is out the effing window. What if 50 say I demand it, and 1 says I protest it? How do you can't really, that can't be your system. But then again, he's obviously, just a jingoistic idiot, and there's really no attempting to tease any logic out of it. So Dan Cois asks, and this is the part, even when I can pronounce his name, it's awkward to read the interview format. But here it is. This is how they've presented it to you. This is an artistic choice by the author. I'm going to respect it, except, I'm going to denigrate it every minute. I'm going to respect the fact that he wants it presented this way and denigrate the fact that he made that choice with every step of the way. So Dan Cois asks, why did the board make the decision to remove the principal of the school? And Barney does a little bit of a shuffle here. Well, or should we give him some kind of dumbass accent? I don't know. Well, anyway, that'll just offend people. So he sounds like me. That's offensive. Well, like all the reporters I've talked to today, the premise that you're operating from is incorrect. All reporters are incorrect. We didn't remove her. She resigned. She's an at-will employee by contract, as are all of our teachers. I went to her last week and offered her 2 letters. One was a voluntary resignation, and another, a letter that said if she decided not to resign, I was going to ask the board to terminate her without cause. Without cause. We have the right to do that under the contract. So how do you like that? That's pretty amazing. What did he ask? So why did the board make the decision to remove the principal? We didn't remove her. We presented her with 2 options, being removed or resigning. And she chose to resign. The other option was we would remove her. So why did you choose to tell her you would remove her so that she would resign under duress? Look over there. I mean, obviously Cois, Dan, if I may, sees right through it and says, so it's safe to say she resigned under pressure from the board. And to his credit, if you want to credit him with anything, Barney Bishop III answers, no question. So that's obviously true, and he acknowledges it. So why did the board make that decision? Which is what I effing asked you a second ago, but you tried to dodge. As I said in the Tallahassee Democrat, Barney says, based on counsel from our employment lawyer, I'm not going to get into the reasons, but, your lawyer is obviously not that excited about standing on at-will employment. So... anyway, but why not? If I'm the lawyer, I tell him don't say anything either, even if there's really no risk. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the reasons, but this wasn't about that one issue. So his claim is we didn't fire her because of Wiener statue. We fired her because of her statue. I don't know. He won't say what. That's not the entire truth, and she knows it. The fact is, the fact is, I have been working with her since she became principal, and I have supported her as principal, but as I saw how things were going, how decisions were being made, I made the decision that this was the best thing for the school. that says nothing. You're saying this wasn't about an art teacher showing Michelangelo's David. We didn't even discuss that issue at the special board meeting on Monday morning, which might mean nothing. I don't know. So this statue wasn't part of the reason the board forced her to resign? That was an issue, along with many others. All the wieners. Look, she wasn't surprised. She knew what was the purpose of our meeting. She had 2 questions. Have you talked to the whole board? And how long do I have to decide between the 2 letters? The meeting was 5 minutes long. It wasn't like, oh my God, you don't want me at the school anymore? No, that doesn't tell me much either. I think in this situation, some boards would say, Dan asks him, we're going to stand by the principal, the trained educator, as opposed to a handful of parents who have an issue. Why did you not go this way? What issue do you believe people had? That the statue was pornographic. You're operating from the wrong premise. The teacher mentioned that this was a non-pornographic picture, number 1. The teacher said, don't tell your parents. Number 2, so the issue, Dan, isn't whether children would see these pictures or not. Gosh, we're a classical school. Why wouldn't we show Renaissance art to children? Yes, I had a question about that, and now that's Dan saying that, and I have that question too, but wait a minute. Let me see. Do I understand this correctly? The teacher mentioned that this was a non-pornographic picture. That's good. The teacher said, don't tell your parents. I mean, is the issue that she said, don't tell your parents, and they're afraid that the kids took that to mean, oh, what she really means that, and that's because she's, I don't know what, she's grooming us, or what, does it require that? Or is it just, she said, don't tell your parents, and was probably kidding, but probably preparing the kids and saying, well, listen, remember, this is classical art, be mature, this is not a pornographic picture, don't tell your parents that it is one, it isn't, or don't tell your parents, haha, because we know what kind of atmosphere exists here in Florida already. And, and then essentially she'd be getting fired for the joke. Anyway, so yeah, what about that? We're a classical school. Why wouldn't we show Renaissance art to children? Well, yes, I had a question about that, says Dan, and the answer is, did parents know in advance what children were going to see and hear and learn? Dan, 98% of the parents didn't have a problem with it. But that doesn't matter because we didn't follow a practice. We have a practice. Last year, the school sent out an advance notice about it. Parents should know. In class, students are going to see or hear or talk about this. This year, we didn't send out that notice. Well, oh no. Anyway, just to be clear, last year, you sent a notice to parents warning them that students were going to see Michelangelo's David. And I assume that Dan at this point is thinking that might not be the flex you think it is. But he says yes. This year we made an egregious mistake. We didn't send that notice. Look, we're not a public school. We're a public charter. Okay? Parents, after they saw all the crap that's being taught in the public schools during COVID, decided of their own, and I guess he means free will, that they didn't want their children to be taught that. I don't know that they necessarily decided that, but here we teach the Hillsdale curriculum, focusing on civic and moral values. We teach a traditional Western civilization, liberal classic education. And if there's controversial topics or subjects, we tell parents in advance, we're going to be sensitive to everybody at that school, at the school. And, the issue is, that in his view, Michelangelo's David is a controversial topic or subject, which it isn't, and especially should not be in the Hillsdale curriculum. But because the Hillsdale curriculum is stupid and backwards, I guess it attracts people who come to the understanding that, that essentially that the wiener is the story of the David statue. That's the focal point. And those people kind of need to be rooted out and straightened out or gotten rid of or what have you. They're just not educated and nothing you can do. Anyway, Dan continues, I tend to think of a classical education as being in the mode of the 17th or 18th century, when you can study the Greeks and Romans and Western civilization is central. A tutor or teacher is the expert, and that teacher drives the curriculum. You're describing something where it seems the parents drive the curriculum. How does your classical education differ from the classical education as I think of it? It's a good question too, right? Classical education, pretty much the teachers reign supreme. They can do almost whatever they want. And I guess he's thinking of, the English tutorial system here, where at the university level, where there's the tutors and the lecturers that do all the instruction, and there's really, there's certainly very little parental input in all of this. But the schoolmasters are the professionals, and they know best. And here we say, even if one parent complains, you got to have some sort of action, and it is sort of upside down and backwards. And what they mean, of course, is classical education. What they mean by that is the stuff that I, wish kids would learn, but taught by, trained animals, who could be, I tell them to roll over in front of the kids, and they roll over in front of the kids. That's classical education. It's not. Anyway, what do we got here? So it's a pretty good question, and watch what Barney does with it, right? Again, I tend to think of classical education as being in the mode of the 17th and 18th century, where you study the Greeks and Romans, Western civilization is central, tutor or teacher is the expert, teacher drives the curriculum. You're describing the opposite. How does your classical education differ from the classical education as I think of it? It's a hard question for an idiot, so he says, what kind of question is that, Dan? I don't know how they taught in the 17th, 18th century, and neither do you. You live in New York? Stunned silence, I assume, ensues. Like, I don't know anything about how they taught in the 17th and 18th century, neither do you. I do read a book. They've written books about how they taught in the 17th and 18th century, and if you crack one open, you'll find out. And you could still find out. The library will tell you if you haven't been to your library. I could even have a drag queen read it to you if you can't read it yourself. And then, of course, what kind of smart-ass answer is that? You live in New York City? I don't know what the guy sounds like, but, and check this out. This is a great exchange. He's pretty sure he scored a point. You live in New York? Virginia is the answer. You got a 212 number? That's New York. I once lived in New York. I bought a phone in New York 18 years ago, whatever it is. I don't see what his answer is, but I mean, that's the obvious answer, things like that. I have a phone from New York and I live in Virginia and whatever, but also not relevant. And yeah, you can find out how they taught in classic liberal education. Read a book about it. If you're going to open a school that says we teach a classical liberal education and you're a dumbass, I still would say you could probably fix that. Read a book. And then say, do what they did in the book, but instead do what they did at the Hillsdale College, which is, of course, indoctrination. But in his mind, it's the good kind, and it's not indoctrination because it's the good kind, and so therefore something woke. And let me tell you, so where you live in New York, Virginia, you got a 212 number. That's New York. I lived in New York when I got the cell phone many years ago. Now I live in Virginia. Well, we're Florida, okay? I looked that up in the book. Parents will decide. Parents are the one who are going to drive the education system here in Florida. The governor said that, and we're with the governor. Parents don't decide what is taught, but parents know what the curriculum is, and parents are entitled to know anytime their child is being taught a controversial topic and picture. So it is about the picture. No! I don't know. Well, anyway, he goes on. Parents chose this school because they want a certain kind of education. We're not going to have courses from the College Board. We're not going to teach 1619 or CRT crap. I know they do that up in Virginia, the seat of the Confederacy. The rights of parents, that trumps the rights of kids. It's like the kids are marching for wieners, and the parents are saying, no, you can't know anything about that. No, parents reign supreme, not the kids. It's what? The kids? I mean, I think you actually kind of want to boost the status of the kids in this a little bit, but that's not the controversy. The parents' rights trump the rights of kids. The rights of teachers is what you're saying. Teachers are the experts. Teachers have all the knowledge. Are you kidding me? I know lots of teachers that are very good, but to suggest they are authorities, you're on better drugs than me. Well, then why are they teaching? I mean, this really is the trained animal theory of education. We'll first teach the teachers, and then it's like you can have an AI chatbot do the teaching. We'll program it for what to say, and then it says it. If you don't say it, then you're not an educator. But that is, if you read a book, you'll find out that it is an upside down and backwards, certainly theory of liberal education. Anyway. Wow. Dan goes on. I see now why it's in interview format. It makes sense. You gotta see how the questions are posed and what the answers are. Okay, good choice here, Dan. Dan goes on to ask, how would the teachers at your school feel to hear you say that they are not authorities? Do you know what classical education is? He asks, and Dan should say, I don't, neither do you. You live in Florida. But he says, I know it in a historical context, but I guess it's not the context you're using it in. Well, he says, the current context is about moral values, civic values, personal responsibility. I'm giving him an accent anyway, even if it's not a Florida accent. Those are the things that aren't being taught in schools. Along with history, science, math, art, music, we don't have safe spaces for kids so they won't be offended by a Halloween costume. We have safe spaces for kids so they won't be offended by marble wieners. Don't you see the difference? I mean, he didn't go on to say that, but I hope Dan, well, anyway. We don't have safe spaces for kids so they won't be offended by a Halloween costume. We don't use pronouns. Oh my God. Where's my sound effects? Holy, I can't believe that the guy just said that. Wow. That's, I'm not even finished with his paragraph, his answer here yet, but what a tirade. This is fantastic. Of course he goes to there's the Halloween costume thing, this sort of, I don't know, mythical or urban myth thing. In New York City, somebody was offended by a Halloween costume, so we have safe space. Now we're talking about people coming in blackface, and you're like, don't do that. Oh, you need a safe space? Come on. But then it goes on. How about this? We don't use pronouns. Of course you use you damn well better use pronouns. If you're not teaching kids what pronouns are, you're not teaching English in your school. Of course, he means the pronouns for liberal loser a-holes. That's what I mean. You teach pronouns, obviously. He's just using pronouns as slang for woke stuff, like when people want to be they instead of him or her. We don't use pronouns. I mean, that's such an incredible mistake for a person in charge of someone's education to make. I understand that you can make the slip and, well, we don't allow people to pick their own pronouns or whatever, and that's dumb too, but at least it's the correct explanation of what's going on. We don't use pronouns. By the way, who don't use pronouns? Didn't you just use one in this sentence? We don't use pronouns. What? What don't use pronouns? I don't understand your English. I mean, holy effing unbelievable. There we go. Hey, a new sound effect I haven't brought out. I actually used that the other day for censorship purposes, but really this is what it should be used for. I'm Barney. What's the guy's name? I don't even remember anyway. And the guy, he doesn't get the name called out every time. In this interview format, but what a jackass. And he's not done. Here we go. Ready? We don't use pronouns. We teach them phonics, which is not, grammar. I don't know what you mean. You teach them phonics. Yes, that's how to read, how words sound, phonics, but we don't teach them what pronouns are. We teach Singapore math. Well, holy crap. How dare you? You son of a bitch! You teach my child American math, or I will hang you! Where are the teachers, where are the parents doing that? I'm going to come in as a parent and put Singapore math! How outrageous! Next thing it'll be Chinese communist math! That's like next door! Singapore math, is that a good flex for American parents? Anyway, they learn to speak Latin. I bet they don't. Every student learns a musical instrument. Oh, wait, do I have a musical instrument here somewhere? I think I do. I know we have the trombone. Every child learns to play a musical instrument. Yeah. I think did I put away somewhere? Yeah, I did, but I don't know if I put in the soundboard. I didn't, but all right. Well, it's going to be too much trouble to pull it up. But somewhere else, I was just thinking, oh yeah, didn't I loaded another sound effect for censorship the other day, and I think it was yeah, here we go. I'll bring it up, and if I had, this would have been a lot easier if I had it already in soundboard. But yeah, we teach kids musical instruments. There you go. Instrument lesson over. Now it's time to look at marble wieners. No, don't look. For God's sake, please. And when I say you don't look, that's a pronoun and I should be thrown out. All right. Well, you can see we're not doing that well at this school so far. Okay. So to move on here, they teach Singapore math. They learn to speak Latin. Everybody learns a musical instrument. And by the way, we have a large number of our students are Title I from poor families, underprivileged families. So it's okay because we took a poor guy. It's not just rich white people. We don't even pick our students. It's a lottery. I mean, I understand that it might be even a valid way of filling out the student body. We don't teach pronouns. We use Singapore math. We don't even know who our students are. Every day, whoever lines up is in our, it's a lottery. We send out notices via the internet. Nigerian princes pick our student body every single day. But I guess this is the value of bringing it out interview style. I like it. I'm definitely validating the choice here on this one. We don't even pick our students. It's a lottery. The mission of the school shows that standards are important. Even poor people have standards. Oh my God. This guy is insane. And there's nothing you can do to stop him. Oh my God. I'm going to learn to play an instrument. Well, there's more. Dan goes on to say, you say you don't have safe spaces for kids to be offended by, say, a Halloween costume, but aren't you just protecting kids, giving them a safe space from Michelangelo's David? Come on, Dan, that's ridiculous. Is it? It seems the same to me, he says. So at least he picks up on the theme. You're determined to make this a story about David. You're going to give it the mainstream media slant. I'm running this as a Q&A, including everything I say and everything you say, showing your disagreement. I'm not going to give it some spin like, here's a crazy Republican. That's my job. Okay. You're going to be objective. That's the job of a journalist. Well, I have my opinion, but I'm trying to show your side as truthfully as possible. Well, I'm dubious that's what will happen. You can text me and tell me how I did. I will. Again, your premise is incorrect. We don't have any problem showing David. You have to tell the parents ahead of time, and they can decide whether it's appropriate for their child to see it. Now, by the way, just curiosity, supposing I give that some credence, and I send out a written letter that says, we're going to be showing Michelangelo's David in class about classical art. Just wanted to get your permission for your child to participate in that day's lesson. I'm curious about what you think the parental response to that is. I'm also curious, do you show them a picture or do you just assume that the parents know Michelangelo's David and understand immediately why they're being asked for their permission? Or do you explain it to them or do you send them to a website? You can go look at this picture because we're afraid to print it. And I bet that's what it is. You can go Google it and look at it and decide whether you want your child to participate. And I mean, if they have to do that, then there's obviously going to be like zero guidance as to why this would be introduced in the classroom. If this is the first you've heard of Michelangelo's David and you have to look it up on the internet in order to figure out whether you want your child to participate, you're going to see a wiener statue. And you're going to say, I don't understand. Why should we be showing wieners to my kids? Especially marble ones. Doesn't make no sense. I mean, do they give them any kind of instruction or context? And if they do, I mean, I don't know. I assume they're giving the kids instruction and context. I'm just curious whether they offer it to the parents or not. But anyway, he then asks, Dan says, have you heard from any parents who disagree about forcing the principal to resign? Or are most of the parents in agreement with this decision? We'll hear from a lot of parents. We have a board meeting on Monday night, our general monthly meeting. So they haven't yet, I guess, or he's not willing to admit it. We spent probably close to an hour listening to public comment this week at the special meeting. My intent, and the board's intent, is not to shut anybody down. There were people hollering for me to step down. Were those people parents? You're not going to hear from people who are happy about it. If they're happy, they're not going to speak at a public meeting. I'm certain that the vast majority of parents have no problem with it. And again, no one has a problem with David. It's not about David. All right, even if it's about the decision making. I mean, if you've heard from people, but you're not going to hear from people who are happy about it, that means you've heard from people who are unhappy about it. Why aren't we protecting those parents' rights? Why aren't you forced to step down? I imagine that that has to cross Dan's mind here too. But they spent a whole hour listening to parents, which are supreme, by the way. They rule supreme for an hour. All right. Well, let's see. It's not about David, he says. And then, of course, Dan knows his facts and says 3 parents had a problem with David. 3 parents objected. 2 objected simply because they were not told in advance. 1 objected because the teacher said non-pornography. Non-pornography, that's a red flag. And, of course, telling the students, don't tell your parents, that's a huge red flag. Now, a non-pornography, of course, is a red flag for pornography, I guess, in his mind. And don't tell your parents only reconfirms that it's pornography, except it's not pornography. And I guess the next question is Michelangelo's David pornography? No. Well, then why is saying that it's not pornography a red flag? Isn't it a green flag? Isn't the teacher telling them the truth about that? Well, why did they don't tell your parents? Kidding, perhaps? Well, don't kid. And there you might have a point. Anyway, coming up on the top of the hour break here, I'll give you 1 or 2 more exchanges here. So Dan says, wait, so the objection was just the teacher used the word pornography in a 6th grade classroom? Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what it comes down to. Yes, that word is inappropriate in that classroom. Number 1, no one said it was pornography. So saying that it's not pornography means that you think it, I don't know. Number 2, it's not on the curriculum. The word pornography, I guess. Number 3, you don't need to be saying that word in a classroom in Florida. I mean, you can see what the problems with this are, obviously. And, what can I tell you? It's gimmitarian education, not liberal education. That's the answer. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Ask your parents whether it's okay to continue listening. So I guess that also is part of the pile on. The teacher said this is not pornography, and it's too dirty to tell 6th graders the word pornography, which, I mean, I kind of get, but of course I would have handled this entirely differently, but I guess I might have said, some parents are upset that you used the word pornography, even though you were saying this is not pornography. Let me suggest, 1, that we not fire anybody, and 2, that when you introduce this to the kids, first of all, please, we won't forget to send the letters anymore, maybe, I guess. Honestly, if I'm looking to accommodate these effing idiots, which I'm really not, but suppose I am, I might say, all right, we'll send the letter. I mean, I guess the letter is a declaration that you're a moron. But I mean, if you want to send that declaration, that's okay. But then say, instead of actually using the word pornography, could we find a synonym that A, that kids would understand better, and B, that won't trigger people so much? I suppose you could say, now kids, I'm going to show you this piece of classical art, and you should understand that I want you to be mature about it. It's classical art, and in classical art times, back when they did this stuff, I don't know, I can't really explain the whys and wherefores of it, but nude sculpture was a thing, and it depicts the classical era, Greeks, Romans, etc., even though David isn't Greek or Roman, but you get the idea. Maybe you don't get the idea. I don't know. You're not educated. And I'm not allowed to educate you. I can only read you the script. And that's the problem, too. Where was the script about what to say about what's going on? are they saying that the teacher should have said she, he, she, I don't know, they, I don't want to use the wrong pronoun, I guess could have said, a lot of you might have initially the reaction that it's somehow private, that we're showing a person's private parts here. But that's not primarily what this is about. And at the time the sculpture was created, it was regarded differently. And, but just to avoid the use of the word pornography, I suppose you could say, kids in 6th grade with weirdo, prudish parents who would enter their kids in a lottery to send them there. That's another thing, too, by the way. Oh, our parents chose not to do this because, but we don't even choose our students. It's a lottery. I mean, do you have to say in step 1 of the lottery, I agree with everything that gets taught here? Or at least that I disagree with what was taught in public school during COVID, and that's why I'm in the lottery? I mean, it seems to me if you don't get to choose your student body per se, you don't really get to speak for who the student body is and what they want either. Unless, I guess you could say, well, they wouldn't enter the lottery unless But they might have a lot of reasons for entering the lottery or doing anything. Anyway, digression. But if you're looking for a way to speak to the children, 6th grade children of prudish parents, if that's who they are, you might pick a different word. But, nonetheless, you're going to end up having to give a warning that, something is being shown here that might be considered, if you weren't adequately prepared for it and don't learn your lessons about it, titillating or prurient in some way. But you can't use those words either because they have the same problem as pornography, which is you might say it in front of a 6th grader whose parents are so controlling that they haven't yet figured out what the word pornography is or means, and now they ask questions, and you have to explain the difference between classical artistic nudity and pornography. What defines pornography? Well, and then you start talking about things that are like, well, now that isn't an appropriate topic. So you might convince me that there's a way to get around that and to instruct the teachers when you prepare the kids for this lesson. Be careful about the words that you use. Like, for instance, don't say it's the Wiener statue. That would be bad. We wouldn't want that to happen. And 2, I guess don't use words that they might not understand. That's just generally a good lesson. One of them would be pornography. Maybe we steer away from that. But to make that the firing offense is actually dumber than making the showing of the David statue the firing offense, which they deny is what it is. They say it's the use of the word pornography, and that's even dumber. So, okay. Where were you? Oh, yeah, right. So now Dan says, look, here's my opinion, and please tell me what you think of it. Are we getting to the end here? No, there's more. Please tell me what you think of it. If I was an educator, I would never think that showing this extremely famous statue sculpted in the classical style in a classical school in a lesson about Renaissance art would be, as you say, controversial. That it would require a letter to parents, not to middle school students, not even to elementary school students. Is your goal to be more clear about what is and isn't controversial? Well, number 1, yes. I appointed an ad hoc committee. I mean, I don't know. Is ad hoc still appointed? I don't really know. I guess if you're learning Latin, you would know better whether or not that is the right definition. Well, let's take a look at that. An ad hoc committee, whenever necessary or needed. Okay, so yeah, I guess it's about that. Not that it is informal per se, in the sense that there is a rotating membership, but as needed. Okay, ad hoc. I see. It's a pretty straightforward understanding of it. Okay, just checking my understanding of the Latin terminology here. All right. I appointed an ad hoc committee so we can see if everybody can come to some kind of consensus on this. What is it? He's answering yes to, is your goal to be more clear about what is and isn't controversial? Okay. Number 2, and he loves listing things this way. You're a reporter, and I wouldn't expect you to think like a teacher who isn't an expert or an authority anyway. Teachers are taught what's controversial. The fact that this art teacher had the gumption to say that we need to send out a letter documents that. But the letter wasn't sent out, and he didn't check to make sure that it was sent out. So really, this is an administrative error, and he's being fired for that. Or the principal's being forced out for not firing the teacher for forgetting to send the letter. All right, so this is interesting, too. So now Dan digs deeper. Wait, so the teacher requested one, but the principal didn't send it out? Yes, and he didn't check. That was an egregious mistake, and we won't make that mistake again. So the teacher said, all right, we're in this dumb, prudish school, and I need to teach Michelangelo. Send out the controversial topic letter. And the principal didn't, either on purpose or administrative oversight. But on top of that, we're also angry that the teacher didn't check. When I said send out the letter, did you send the letter? Now, I don't know that they need to check, really, but basically he's just looking for people to blame in all this. But, you know, you make the request, you kind of figure the principal's a responsible figure in all this. I'll just assume that the letter went out. But no, because there's a wiener involved, you know, you're supposed to double check to make sure. Now, kids, did all of your parents get their mail? I don't know. Did they, you know, and you know, what are parents going to do with this thing, right? They get notice that the David statue is going to be shown. They either know what it is and appreciate it as art, know what it is and think it's filthy pornography, don't know what it is and look it up and come to the conclusion that it's filthy pornography. I don't know. But if they haven't gotten the letter, would the kids know? If they have got the letter, would the kids know? If they got the letter and they said that it was not, you know, and they came to the conclusion it wasn't pornography, would they tell their kids, I just want to let you know that today you're going to go to class and not see pornography. Just wanted to make it clear to you that that was what was happening. Or do they just say, hey, you know, I have no objection, don't say anything to the kids? I don't know how the teacher double checks. I mean, right. So by the way, imagine the situation is, what if you say, we're teaching the controversial subject, send out the controversial subject letter. The principal doesn't send the letter. The teacher goes and says, did you send the letter? Now, if the principal did it on purpose, the principal might say, yeah, I sent the letter. Or might make a mistake and say, yeah, I sent the letter, but actually they forgot to send the letter. Or the principal told the secretary, send the letter, and the secretary didn't send the letter. That's an interesting thing. The teacher says, send the letter. The principal says, hey, secretary, send the letter. Secretary doesn't send the letter. Who do we fire? Principal, the person in the middle who conveyed the request from the teacher. But maybe also the teacher, because they didn't check to see if the letter went out. Now, how do you check to see if the letter went out? You send a second letter. Did you receive our first letter? How do you, are you assured that the second letter will go out? You can see they're just looking to backfill their explanation here. They probably hauled all three people, if there was a third person, in, and they got, you know, apologetics from the teacher and from the secretary, but got pushback from the principal, or they were angry at the principal about something else. So they ended up making the principal the scapegoat here. That's my guess. But there you go. So the teacher requested a letter, but the principal didn't send it out? Yes. And he didn't check. That's an egregious mistake, and we won't make that mistake again. I assume you're now checking to see whether you've made that mistake again. But no, probably not, because they've declared that they won't make it again. All right, so this is the last word here, is Dan just says, I just don't think this statue is controversial. We're not going to show the full statue of David to kindergartners, so it's about wieners. We're not going to show him to second graders. Showing the entire statue of David is appropriate at some age. We're going to figure out when that is. They got no plan. They've got an ad hoc committee to figure out when is it okay to wienerize the kids. You know, statutorily speaking, not statutorily, although that might have to come into it too. I don't know. And you don't have to show the whole statue, he says. Maybe to kindergartners, we only show the head. Oh my God. What is it? Yeah, I can see, he figures, you're going to have a graduated scale for this, right? If it's some grade level, and it's clearly not the 6th grade level, that it's just A-okay to show the whole statue without having a letter go out. But, all right, let's say by the end of middle school, 8th grade, it's okay to show the whole statue. Obviously, you don't show the whole statue to kindergartners. But what I like is, so you're thinking about maybe just the top half of the statue, the torso and the head. No, because this is obviously has to be on a scale. So maybe the kindergartners just see the head. Showing them a naked male torso. You can't, oh my God. So, but I guess just because they think it has to be a graduated scale, he's like, maybe just you know what? In fact, maybe just the hairline. This is crazy. Wow. Okay. We're not going to show the full statue to kindergartners. We're going to show it to 2nd graders. We're going to figure out what this is. And you don't have to show the whole statue. Maybe to kindergartners, we show only the head. You could appreciate that. No, I see. You can appreciate that. Yes, you can appreciate the sculpting. You can show the hands, the arms, the muscles. The beautiful work Michelangelo did in marble without showing the whole thing. Okay. All right. Like I said, that's what really explains the story. This is a gimmitarian backfilled answer to make them look like they have actual principles, which they don't. And that's maybe one of the best illustrations I've seen of it. Very much appreciate then Dan Coe's doing this and presenting it in interview format. Excellent call on his part. And, okay call on my part for including it in the show. The other one I'm not going to do. But I want to make you aware of it. And I'm not going to do it because this one I think is huge and will take up all our time and a lot more niche of a project to read through. But I'll tell you what it is. It is an interview or a transcript, I guess, here by Dan Feit, maybe Feidt, writing at Unicorn Riot, which I think we may even have mentioned before. I'm sure I'm getting these things by picking them up on Mastodon. People who are regular readers are tweeting or tooting them around, and I see it here. But this looks like an interesting background reader. FBI informant microchip. That's the name by which they operate online. FBI informant microchip surfaces in white supremacist election interference trial. The subheader reads, Strategies of Right-Wing Harasser Armies, Chat Groups, Election Interference, aired in court proceedings. It's actually quite fascinating. Because microchip, well, one, the fact that you continue to be identified by your online screen name is interesting and odd all by itself. They eventually tell you who it is. That's part of the story too. And two, this is the person who themselves is an active right-wing troll, but who flips and turns state evidence, I guess, as they used to call it, or an FBI informant now, who has inside knowledge of how these people work. And that's kind of fascinating all by itself. So I'll give you a flavor for what this is all about by reading the introduction to it, and then you can decide whether it's something you want to continue with, probably on your own, because we'd never get through it here, I don't think. Federal prosecutors have put internet troll Douglass Mackey, that's his actual name. Oh, no, this is a different guy. Douglass Mackey on trial for allegedly attempting to trick voters into trying to vote by SMS message in the 2016 election. In other words, he sent something around that said, you can vote safely and securely from home by text. Just send your vote to this thing. And then I guess the hope is that people would then not also go to the polls and vote. They would think, I can only vote once, and I voted in valid fashion by text message already, so I don't have to go. It's a voter suppression attempt. It's one of the dumber ones, because I wouldn't be surprised at all if people said, either, I'm not so sure that my vote actually counted. I'm going to go and see if I can't back everything up and cast my vote. Even if they think that their first vote was valid, they might think it's okay to back it up by voting. It's, I think, probably the rare thing here is a person who is convinced that they can vote by text and then does the analysis and comes to the conclusion, I'll be prosecuted if I try to vote a second time. So I just won't. I mean, it's a very weird, narrow band of people who are going to do the analysis correctly. But anyone that they suppress from voting, I suppose, is a victory, especially for a low-cost program like texting people. Anyway, the point is that he's trying to do this. Mackey, also known as Ricky Vaughn, I guess one of his online personas as well, was one of the election's most influential posters among a web of right-wing and white supremacist activists, which included neo-Nazi Daily Stormer publishers Andrew Anglin and Andrew Allen Escher Orenheimer, a.k.a. Weave. That's a name I've seen before, W-E-E-V. And I guess it was Ricky Vaughn, the name of the character from Major League that Charlie Sheen played, because that photo was all over the place here as well. Okay. Well, anyway, this is who we're talking about. Douglass Mackey is the guy on trial for his voter suppression efforts, and he's one of the most influential posters among right-wing white supremacist activists up to and including the Daily Stormer guys. On Wednesday, March 22nd, this week, one of their former Confederates, that's a good use of the word, a technical expert known as Microchip, testified for the government that he has been an FBI informant since 2018 and had assisted Mackey, the guy who's actually on trial here, in his alleged efforts to keep black and Hispanic people from voting. Well, Mackey's identity was first exposed by Luke O'Brien in a 2018 HuffPost report. The main case is United States versus Mackey. It is believed that Microchip's cooperating guilty plea case also has a docket number, but that has not been confirmed. The Wednesday hearing aired new facts that Microchip apparently voluntarily started cooperating, in 2018, but notified U.S. District Judge Ann M. Donnelly that he would plead guilty in March 2022 to charges under 18 U.S. Code Section 241, a conspiracy to deprive other people of rights or violate their rights. Donnelly is also hearing Mackey's trial right now. After Mackey was arrested in 2021, O'Brien described Microchip as, quote, a fascist accelerationist who has expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler and Nazism. He claims to have been involved in the early spread of the QAnon conspiracy cult and repeatedly told this reporter that his goal was to destroy the United States. It's a bad goal, by the way. To get a snapshot of the latest turns in this case, Unicorn Riot interviewed Joe Fionda after a long day of court watching. Fionda is a researcher and associate producer of the 2014 documentary The Hacker Wars, which examined the milieu around Weave and others. He has attended most of the trial so far, which is unfolding in the Eastern District of New York. We took a deep dive into not just Microchip's FBI informant deal exposed on Wednesday, but the backstories surrounding the internet troll farms during the 2016 election and groupings like Gamergate, which preceded it, which I need to remind everybody. I think we've said as much on the show, but it's been a long time since we did so, that I think it's fair to say that during the actual heyday of Gamergate, there was a lot of dismissal of its meaning because ultimately, I mean, it was poorly named, I think, and made it sound like, well, if you're not a gamer, then you really don't have much to be concerned about here. And if you do have something to be concerned about, if you even then said, well, what is Gamergate? What's it all about? You might be able to say, I find interest in it as a supporter of, feminism or whatever approach you wanted to take to it. That just generally, I don't like the idea of guys ganging up on anybody in particular, but particularly women to drive them out of either the gaming industry or the gaming review industry, and then, of course, uncovering the whole ridiculousness of the claim that it's about integrity and gamer, and game design coverage, and all the various excuses that they offered for ganging up on, beating up on, threatening online, terrorizing in real life women who dared to have a different opinion than some gamer bro about something. But also that, yes, there was, in fact, a political angle to it and a connection. And I think at some point long ago, we even read a story, and we might even have read it twice under different circumstances, about Steve Bannon being curiously involved in the development of the culture that led to Gamergate and driving the Gamergate controversies with the intent of converting people into political activists for Republican candidates, and in particular later for Trump, via various online forums populated by gamers. But to delve into gamer culture and try and turn generally confused young men into angry, reactionary voters who could be commanded as an army for someone like Trump. And it's really remarkable that anybody could for anybody to have that kind of vision, but to employ it for such dark and stupid reasons seems a real waste. But anyway, I'm interested in it from that perspective. But again, this too presented in transcript format. The editor notes here, this rush transcript of an interview has been edited for style and clarity. Fionda's opinions are his own and do not represent Unicorn Riot. But again, they're talking to a person who's been observing this universe for some time and following this trial of, what's his name? Mackey, Douglass Mackey, and the involvement of this weirdo, FBI informant / person who has pled guilty to some other sort of involvement in weird white supremacist world. And it seems really kind of interesting and revealing. I'll give you maybe the first exchange or two between Unicorn Riot and Joe Fionda just to see what sort of information is emerging. It does say that some new stuff comes to light here. Here's the Unicorn Riot interviewer asking, all right, it's March 22nd, 2023, and I'm talking with Joe Fionda. Thanks for chatting with Unicorn Riot tonight, Joe. So you've had your eye on this defendant and their sort of circle of friends for quite some time. Would you say you've been an observer of them for quite a while? Yeah, I'd say so. It's kind of like we're reliving the 2016 election and watching, the same list of characters turn up now in a federal case 7 years later. Good. Eventually there should be some accountability for these people. And there's lots of people that might be like, well, what's the whole point of this case? We know Tucker Carlson spent the other night trying to say this was some sort of like heinous abuse of justice by the Biden administration, targeting Trump supporters over mere memes. And there's lots more to this case than really just, frankly, whitewashing what is going on. And what the government is presenting is a case of conspiracy to deprive rights, otherwise known as the KKK Act, 18 U.S. Code Section 241. That's a good point. I mean, referring to it as 18 U.S. Code Section 241 is kind of dry, but call it the Ku Klux Klan Act, and people get the idea of what's going on. All right, so a section here, it says, the Mackey trial, deceptive messages and hotline to trick voters. Unicorn Riot says, so okay. 18 U.S. Code Section 241. The defendant here is a man whose name is Douglass Mackey. He oftentimes was known as Ricky Vaughn online, and he hasn't been convicted of anything yet. Still presumed innocent. Joe says, yeah, today was the third day of trial in the Eastern District of New York. This is the third day of trial, and the case isn't simply just about memes. Now, I guess that's what the right wing is saying. They're prosecuting people for memes now. Look what's coming. It's tyranny, I tell you. But the case that the government is accusing against Douglass Mackey and several other co-conspirators is that they got together on Twitter DM groups, direct message groups, and in some cases coordinating directly with the Trump campaign HQ Slack chat to spread memes of a derogatory and generally false nature. But the specific charges here regarding a number of memes that were sent that pretended to pass itself off as being from the Hillary Clinton campaign, with the internet, with the internet, whatever that's supposed to mean, to present to Hillary voters as people who they saw as dupes. So obviously they're doing some sort of false flag operation with memes online, meant to be passed around, I guess, unwittingly by Hillary people. I don't know. They, in their minds, saw as minorities, black voters, Mexican voters, women. They wanted to deceptively tell people that they could go and tweet by text. I think what he means is that they could vote by text. They could send Hillary to this number, 59925, and that their vote on election day would be counted, which, as me and you both know, is not something that is actually something that can be done anywhere outside of a voting booth or mail-in voting. All right, well, they needed to clean this interview up a little bit more to make it more sense. But okay, so you see what the scheme is, and you see what the right-wing spin on the trial is. We'll be right back after this to see if there's more you need to know. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Woo, okay, so I'm just sort of skimming down, and I hated how I ended the end of the last segment and said, we'll be back after this to tell you if there's anything more you need to know. And you know I hate that construction of headline. Here's what you need to know about it. What I mean is, okay, some of this stuff is now introductory, and I don't think they edited this one down quite enough to get rid of stuff we didn't need to know, superfluous stuff at the top, things we know and on background, etc. But skipping down a little further, Unicorn Riot's interviewer asks Joe Fionda here, okay, so I guess one of the major elements that's been presented so far that you mentioned is Slack, right? After they go over the basics of, okay, well, what they did was they set up this voter suppression system whereby they would target Hillary supporters with texts that say you can vote by text. Just text Hillary to this number and you will have voted and you don't have to bother to show up. And that's an idea of suppressing turnout for election day. But what about this idea that they were coordinating on this with Trump headquarters via Slack? And I guess some of you might somehow not know what Slack is, but probably you all know. So as they say, just to lay that out, I guess one of the major elements that's been presented so far, you mentioned a Slack. Can you explain what a Slack would be so that they're connected to the official campaign? The government has said so far, or what? And Joe says, yes, the government presented one of the group chats, the Twitter direct message group chats, in which notorious provocateur Baked Alaska, you remember that person, who is named, I guess, as an unindicted co-conspirator in this case. Unicorn Riot is saying Baked Alaska is Anthem. Is that his actual name? I thought it was I don't know. Is that like Anthony? Anthem Tim Gionet. Gionet. I never did learn how to pronounce his name. Gionet, maybe? I don't know if he's Frenchified and all that, but you know, Baked Alaska, done a bunch of stupid things, basically a little bit like whatever. I don't know. Who was I going to compare him to? What's the guy's name? Jacob something. I'm blanking on. But, one of the prankster / criminals that they keep over there, and also arrested at January 6th in the riot, and found himself in Pelosi's office, et cetera, et cetera. A real a-hole, basically. Joe Fionda saying, yeah, that's Baked Alaska. And he was telling me some of the members of the chat. He was telling some of the members of the chat, sorry, not telling me. Would you like access to the Trump HQ Slack? He doesn't then explain what Slack is for some reason. He ignores that part of it. So we have instances in which people in a number of chats have demonstrated a closeness with the core of the Trump campaign in 2016. Now, if I remember how 2016 went down, it was a rather large group of infamous, S-posting, neo-Nazi alt-right, or what would become the alt-right, Twitter trolls from all around the world who got together and effectively wanted to install Donald Trump as president. All right, well, whatever. For those of you who don't know, Slack is just a communication tool that a lot of times companies will have a Slack channel. It's basically an open group messaging platform that, you subscribe to the Slack group you want to communicate with, whether that's in your office or just a division of your office or everybody in your company or whatever. And it's messaging back and forth, and you can reach each other during the day. It's a little bit more direct than email. If you keep the Slack channel open, it'll, make noise when somebody slacks at you, and, basically it would be just a way for them to stay in constant contact with one another. And in order, it would be an odd thing, and I guess it has evidentiary value, in this case, that the Twitter trolls who have their own communications device, the Twitter DM channel here, are also being offered connection with the Trump campaign headquarters Slack channel that shows coordination, which can, complicate the cases against people or make the cases against people, as the case may be here. So, all right. During the period of 2016, this defendant, I think the government has raised the argument that this defendant, Douglass Mackey, was, kind of the main person behind an account known as Ricky Vaughn. Is that true? And Joe says, yep. Ricky Vaughn is a character in the 1989 baseball film Major League. Okay, we got that right. It's been a very long time since I've seen that movie. And his avatar is Ricky Vaughn from the baseball team, and he's wearing these glasses, and he photoshopped a Make America Great Again red hat onto Ricky Vaughn. So he's appropriating the character of the movie to be this anonymous political Twitter troll who's giving help to the Trump campaign first in the primaries and then into the general election. Now about microchip testifying. So today, March 22nd, the interesting thing was that someone who was kind of one of the remaining anonymous figures of that era and who had been known by the handle microchip testified as well. Can you talk about what microchip was publicly seen as and then what happened today with him? And Joe says, right. So back in 2016, he testified that he signed up the first microchip persona account in 2015 and that he was, this guy who was a mobile web app developer, a coder, who had a very special skill set to aggregate tweets and data and inflate view counts and follow counts. He described in detail how he would make new Twitter accounts every time he got banned and how he would pay certain services online to create bot armies and inflate view counts and be able to artificially amplify tweets that were favorable for the Trump campaign. Now, what's also very interesting is that he's been very insistent on saying that he did it primarily more because he hated Hillary Clinton than that he liked Donald Trump. More that he wanted Donald Trump to be president. More than he wanted. Okay. Even though he was pretty profusely ardent Trump supporter, he made a point that it was driven more by his hatred of Hillary Clinton. One of his chats that they organized earlier, like in 2015, which included many famous individuals such as Milo Yiannopoulos and Weave, was called Fed Free Hate Chat. Okay, except he was a Fed, so that's a problem. Ironic, since today, Unicorn Riot explains, his status of cooperating with the government. Can you explain what kind of came to light about this figure whose name is still unknown, his legal name? So I don't know his legal name, says Joe. Over the years, this has been a subject of much speculation due to his prolific nature. And I do know what he looks like now. And he looks like pretty much how I would imagine somebody like him would look like. He's somebody who seemed very, despite the fact that he cooperated with the government and that he pled guilty to a crime in this case, to hopefully get a downward departure at sentencing. He looked like he was otherwise very proud about what he did. He didn't seem remorseful about any of the actions he took. That was certain. Like the sense that if he was given the choice to do this again, he absolutely would do it again. Well, now I'm further into reading this thing than I had hoped for. But I guess I was hoping that we would uncover more of the inside story. But maybe I dedicate the rest of Friday to this after all, although this isn't as clean and crisp an interview by any means. Let's see. Was it clear if what he had been charged and pleaded guilty to was part of this case? Like, was he, indicted and kind of rolled as part of this or something else? I'll just add that we don't have access to the transcripts. We're sort of picking out the details as we can day by day, and this is all brand new. And Joe says, so this is where it gets a little bit confusing. Ready? I wrote about like 30 pages of notes today and scribbles, so I'm kind of recounting this as to the best of my ability to read my own chicken scratch handwriting. Microchip was, quite accomplished about his record, but it was unclear as to the true original nature of his cooperating with the FBI. So there was some examination by Mackey's defense specifically about dates and times that the FBI came and visited him and the lead agent on the particular case. It was kind of a meandering examination because I wasn't quite sure what Mr. Mackey's lawyer, Andrew Frisch, was trying to say. But we do know that Mr. Microchip, as he is called, in 2018, he was first visited by the FBI and claimed that he became an informant in 2018. Apparently voluntarily, on his own volition, said that he was beginning to work with the FBI. In what capacity? We have no idea. They would not share. That was kind of an off-limits thing, specifically with this trial, because it didn't relate to this trial, or doesn't appear to relate to this trial. When Microchip cooperated with the government, he would be visited, or they would bring him to the FBI, and it seemed like most of the time it was to the Eastern District of New York. He said he was visited twice, once in 2018 and then at the end of 2020. About a month before the inauguration, a couple of weeks before January 6th, I believe, it ended up being like the end of December that he had been visited, and that there was some attempt of his from his first lawyer. We also don't know who his previous lawyer was, to make contact with the lead agent in the investigation against him. So, he described the encounter in 2018 as sitting in a car with two FBI agents and explaining to them that what he could do for the agency. And this is without, apparently, a threat of prosecution at that point. I'm trying to figure out, what else specifically about the cooperation that was kind of black boxed. That was quite interesting, but we aren't quite sure. As we know, in the past, the Trump FBI, the Trump years, was at the time where our own president was somebody who was so paranoid about him or his supporters being prosecuted by the federal government because the people doing it would find themselves out of jobs. That seemed to be happening quite a lot during the Trump administration. So an interesting point here is the FBI is visiting him in 2018, but Trump is president at this point. So they're investigating whether or not there's crimes involved in making Trump president, but Trump is sitting atop the FBI, and the investigators who are doing some of these investigations are getting fired along the way. Interesting point. So Unicorn Riot's interviewer says, so it was clear, would you say, that Microchip's cooperation is still ongoing? Like it's not a completed project? Like he testified, but it's still an active state he's in? Correct. It would appear to include the trial and also other matters that they understand that we did not provide for us publicly in court. But the specific statute was, again, 18 U.S. Code 241, conspiracy to deprive rights or violate rights. And that was Microchip's charge that he pleaded to at some point? Yes. So it's also not apparent what other crimes he may or may not have been charged with, like CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, or anything else. They asked Microchip to plead to a straight Section 241. Well, that's very helpful, to understand. And Joe says, okay, so sometime between February 4th, 2021 and April 22nd, 2021, February and April 2021, he was arrested, had been arrested. We don't know the exact date. He had a different lawyer at that point. He also said that he was indebted to the IRS and may have had bankruptcy debt. Microchip agreeing to a tolling agreement to suspend the statute of limitations on his charge on June 24th, 2021, because at that point it was going to eclipse the 5-year statute of limitations. And he notified the judge, who's the same judge, Judge Ann Donnelly, for this case, notified her in March of 2022 and the Eastern District that he was intending to plead guilty and had entered a sealed guilty plea on April 14th, 2022. Okay. I think there was some exchanges about something involving a 36 hours and drug use. Can you mention that briefly? The defense cross-examination also included what many of us assume to be Micro's most recent and last account string. This is, I guess, maybe a Twitter handle it uses, WDFX2EU9000. 9,000 apparently as homage to over 9,000. And the Chan anonymous lore, I guess it comes from, 4chan background, right? Doesn't make any sense to me, but to me it's just a number. But again, maybe we need to have our consciousness raised about their little codes here. He made some tweets about his drug use to the public, saying that he was on an Adderall binge for 36 hours and programming ChatGPT into voice-to-text bots or something to that effect. It's not apparent on whose behalf he was doing it, whether it was the job that he told the court he has or that it was on behalf of the federal government or something else. That's weird and doesn't really help very much to understand things, but he's into weird stuff. Okay, so that was quoted online, says Unicorn Riot. Joe answers, he also tweeted that he was at Oregon during that time. At Oregon. In Oregon or at Oregon? I don't know. And that also became a point of contention for the court because they've stipulated that he would not have to share the state that he was living in. So it's, okay, I was just wondering when he said at Oregon, do you mean like at the University of Oregon or living in Oregon and you're just saying it funny? Other than that, it was not the New York City metropolitan area. He was very concerned about keeping his identity secret in exchange for his cooperation because he felt it would hurt his business, personally endanger him, and that he would not have a business, that means hurt his business, if his true identity were to be exposed. So yeah, we were reading these tweets out in court and I was snarfing, like laughing, trying not to laugh because he was explaining readings and his tweets. I mean, it was truly bizarre. He's like, as you know, a despicable sort of character. I got the humor and wouldn't even know what to call the vibe, the visibly sweaty, hairy, greasy appearance, I guess he's talking about here. And he had the aura on him of somebody that was a hardcore internet troll or king internet troll and had a mullet, like not Ricky Vaughn, the other baseball guy, Kenny Powers mullet. So, people got to see him. His name is still anonymous to the public. He wants to keep it that way. I don't think that's going to happen, nor do I think he deserves to have that kind of anonymity. So then a discussion of Mackey and Milo and the MAGA swarms comes up. And I don't know. It seems to me like this is just a confused mess, and it's probably better read by yourself than read aloud. But to give you a sense of the other things that are discussed, the next section, Brexit memes recycled. That's an important connection. Court limits references to repellent posts. Next section, playbooks and manuals, Gamergate revisited, and the launch of MAGA 3X. Interesting. The Gamergate part is probably kind of interesting. And I guess I've given myself no room on the other side of this story, such that I might as well perhaps allude to or read about the Gamergate stuff that I alluded to earlier. We'll skip down to there. Joe Fionda here begins by saying, at the end of the day, I saw it. I know you saw it, at least samples of the sort of hate and harassment. I have been shown by people who kept receipts of the harassment that they were engaging in at that particular time, back in Gamergate days. You briefly mentioned Gamergate and the fact that some of the people who had known each other in that era, can you just explain the idea there and what the connection would be? And Joe says, well, how do we go back to Gamergate? Gamergate started because there was a misogynistic online troll campaign claiming to be about, quote, ethics in video game journalism. And really, this is how it escaped, I think. I'm just adding this commentary. How it escaped scrutiny at the time was because if it was about, I mean, it wasn't, but the excuse that it was about ethics in video game journalism, they almost inadvertently warned most people off this. Well, who cares about video game journalism? Who cares about video games, period? Well, gamers do, yes. But generally, mainstream people will be like, well, it's about video games? Unserious. It's about video game journalism? Unseriousness about unseriousness. Who cares? But, you know, it is an important world. And it had a real effect because it was speaking to people who were otherwise disaffected from politics and could ordinarily be counted on to stay out of it, but also were a little weird and might be just that easily manipulated into doing something political because they didn't really understand or grasp the importance of it. They just thought it'd be fun to own people or oppone people, as they say. And if that's enough to get you involved in politics, who knows what you could be influenced to do. Now back to Joe's commentary here. It started, as you all know, claiming to be about ethics in video game journalism, and it became a thing where many people started getting doxxed and swatted. You know all about those things. It was quite chaotic, and Milo Yiannopoulos, remember him, was a main character and provocateur of this day because he wrote about it for Breitbart. But before that, I think he was ready. He had his own failed attempt at a magazine, blanking on the name. Unicorn Riot says, Gamergate was known as a highly organized system of harassment toward people. Correct. And finding targets. And so it seems like that type of energy and style and that kind of dangerous quality sort of got recycled into this group, the political side, this sort of network. Would you say that's in the right area? Joe says, correct. Yeah. Literal terrorists in the group. You know, it was about the same space that the Sam Hyde meme would have come out in. I'm not familiar, but I guess that's code for something. People understand what that is. You can look it up. Sam Hyde, Hyde. I don't know. And these guys would swat people. They would engage in hideous harassment. A lot of it was transphobic harassment. Transphobic, right? Okay. And the same people that were involved in that took that and they rolled it into the Trump campaign and the MAGA 3X crowd and then the alt-right. It was a rolling Katamari Damacy. I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't have any idea, but you got to know the culture there. Katamari, Katamari, Damacy, Damasy. It was a rolling Katamari Damacy ball of the worst people on the internet barreling down for Trump. Gamergate? You want to even go further back before that with Weave and those guys? It's GNAA and Goatsy Security. We're talking about some earlier days here. Okay. But the original, 4chan disgusting anything goes / free speech / let's harass everybody we hate thing. And it was kind of went under, like I said, under the radar because it was not about mainstream political stuff. It was about stuff that you could just say, unserious games. Who cares? Don't pay any attention. Unicorn Riot now asking, and MAGA 3X, can you just explain how that idea connects to this trial? Let's see. Right. There's MAGA 3X PAC created by Jeff, I don't know what, Giassi, maybe Giesea, who is a former lieutenant, that is to say, trusted assistant, not like a actual rank, of Peter Thiel, apparently. And they held a number of events for the Trump campaign. There was a number of groups kind of circled around that, like a Venn diagram, like Gays for Trump. Is that Yiannopoulos and his group, I guess, maybe? Where a lot of these people ended up in the same effing place, like Laura Loomer, who actually ran for Congress. Milo, the effing guy from Gateway Pundit, Jim Hoft, Hoan Ton That of Clearview AI, Chuck Johnson, kind of connected. Remember Chuck Johnson, the, I don't know. I can't even remember what his online persona was. But yeah, one of the most horrible trolls in the world. Not the Little Green Footballs one, who was once one of the more horrible trolls, but then changed. But anyway, those names haven't come up yet in the trial, though. Is that correct? And he says, filmmaker Lauren Feldman testified that he was introduced to Ricky Vaughn by Mike Cernovich and Chuck Johnson. Okay, so their names did come up. Okay, yeah. And so MAGA 3X would have been kind of like the background movement that's connected to these happenings. Joe says, yeah. So like in the later days of the campaign, the idea of MAGA 3X was bring 3 people to vote with you. The old GOTV stuff. It was a get out the vote campaign, but it was also based in Gamergate. Okay, so for someone that's new to it, you'll say that all these things didn't exactly happen at the same time, but they were related and involved some of the same people. Is that how you put it? There were playbooks, there were manuals written, and there were objectives, and there were foreign players involved. A number of foreign players involved in England and the Netherlands. And, people like Weave, who were at that point hanging out in like Donetsk, the People's Republic, or no man's land, that is to say, Ukraine, right? The eastern provinces of Ukraine that claim to be breakaway republics. So interesting that they were already in Putin's orbit that early. They were, too hot to handle figures even in the United States. So they just removed themselves from American jurisdiction and put themselves in the breakaway provinces of eastern Ukraine, doing God knows what. Going back to what he says here, like in a troll hole. But that's where his masterminding came from, being many, many, many time zones away from the U.S. and out of reach of extradition. So, in the last few days of this trial, are there any prominent figures who have been name dropped in testimony? Let's see. Remember, guys, in 2016, like Jared Wyand, Neil Turner, NIA for Trump, was not indicted, but named as a co-conspirator. It's strongly implied that they're also cooperating. There was one last thing I wanted to say. The names of the fake likes and fake follower companies were AdMeFast and Follows, Fast Follows with a Z. They went into detail about how he would put money into that so he would keep the bots going. People also ought to look at this trial to see that the government will get everything on your service if they have a legal warrant to get in. These people ran a tight ship, and I don't recall these channels leaking. And now we see them in court, and they're pretty eye-opening. All right, well, that was fascinating. It really is the seedy underbelly of a very subversive mode of campaigning. But again, the government's contention is that it went over the line simply campaigning or just lying on the internet. They're alleging that Mr. Mackey did something illegal by doing that phone number and sort of trying to convince people that they could text to vote for the Democratic candidate. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's very unusual, and we appreciate the details all about that, all jotted down. A flow of handwritten notes over 3 days so far. The Douglass Mackey trial in Eastern District of New York, which is where in New York City? The answer, Brooklyn. All right. So then they wrap up this thing with some more pleasantries, but, I don't know. It was a little confusing, but I do recommend that you read it because I think that, I don't know, this probably should break through into mainstream news, but won't. Maybe once they get a conviction, possibly, but it's very convoluted, and I think I really do think there's nothing particularly unusual. It's totally illegal, but I think it happens more often than we think with these things like the fake text-to-vote type scams. What's interesting here is that how they roped in previously, I think, largely apolitical, alienated young men, generally, into doing this work. And then, of course, the fact that they cracked into their messaging groups is going to be very revealing too, and show that there was direct coordination, which would implicate the Trump campaign itself in this illegality, which is a violation of the KKK Act. I mean, I think at some point, if they ever pressed the case that the Trump campaign violated the Klan Act, that's, really something and a little bit eye-opening. But yeah, talking about the seamy underbelly of the internet and the fact that it's all connected and that these people, when they had to hide out, were hiding out in Russian-controlled eastern provinces of Ukraine way earlier than we really had Ukraine on our radar in the way it is today. I don't know. I find that pretty fascinating. And even if it is something of a difficult read, I don't know. It's a tough Friday, as I said. But okay, so this will be the worst possible Friday, I think, for poor Scott Anderson. We'll have to try to summarize what the hell we just read. But I thought the education story from Florida was well presented, well filtered and cleaned up, and fun fodder for discussion. This microchip thing, the people who observe the trial are as much chaotic mess as the people who are on trial, but at least they're not evil. So we can't fault them for not having organized thoughts when we don't have organized thoughts ourselves. I don't know. Simply something that I thought we had the luxury of examining in a show like ours. You'll also perhaps delight in seeing the sketches that Joe made of Microchip and what he looks like. And my goodness, when he says that he looks kind of like what you thought he would, a little bit like comic book guy. Not a great sketch artist, Joe, but that's not what he's there for. Anyway, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, where he actually organizes his thoughts. Here's what he's got on tap for you today. Republicans have abandoned all pretense and are brazenly weaponizing Congress to save Trump. We knew they would be up to that. Also, of course, a Pennsylvania judge dismissed the latest GOP mail ballot lawsuit. And unions for service workers at Walt Disney World reached a deal that would raise the starting minimum wage to $18 an hour. All right, not too bad.
You've been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
How about this development? Reversing the state's long opposition, North Carolina just approved Medicaid expansion. Good news. And what about the rest of stuff around the world? The founder of Terraform Labs, wanted in South Korea in connection with a $40 billion crash to the firm's cryptocurrency, arrested in Montenegro.